the link, right?
Yep. We are
right.
Live. Good evening.
Hello. Wow. We are live again for a famous Parker Radio Association Elmering Night, or Elmer Night. I guess that's a debate whether it's supposed to be called Elmering Night or Elmer Night, but I guess either one. It's we're glad you're here tonight. And let's see. I want to thank somebody's got some audio on there. I want to thank Justin and Wayne tonight. Not only are they officers of the club, they're also our technical gurus. So this is being presented tonight due to N0AD and A2 Lima. Hello, gentlemen. How are you tonight?
Good. I was glad to see everybody tonight. And I'll take a look and keep an eye on the YouTube channel.
Okay, great. Well, we have a fantastic presentation tonight. If you've attended the club meetings the last couple years, we did this presentation in person, and we've got a lot of people commented on it, on how well they liked it, and so we thought, well, hey, let's do it again tonight. And I've got my partner in crime over there, Tom. You want to introduce yourself?
Let me unmute because somebody said I had audio, so let me do that. My name's Tom Frericks. I'm AE0GQ, Alpha Echo Zero, Gulf, Quebec. Please use standard ITU phonetics and speak slowly.
Oh, very good, Tom. Excellent suggestion for not only Google Meets Live and YouTube Live, but all of our nets as well. Hey, let me just briefly let everybody know that if you didn't know, I think most of you do, but we have 3 nets every week. We have our Monday night digital net, which I think now has been enhanced greatly by the addition of the D-Star repeater that's up on Squaw Mountain. So check that out if you haven't checked it out. Fantastic coverage. And if you don't have a D-Star radio, well, maybe you should be looking for one. And so that's our digital net. You can get in via D-Star. You can get in via Fusion. You can get in via DMR. And that's Monday night at 8 p.m. on our mega repeater. Information on the webpage. And then don't forget Tuesday night at 8 p.m. is our analog net on the W0 CFI repeater. And we're getting 20 plus check-ins on Tuesday night. We had a net here a few weeks back. We had close to 30 check-ins. It's a fun net. So come on in and join the party. That takes an analog UHF radio on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. And then Thursday night, we have an Elmer/TechNet, also on the W0 CFI repeater. And that is every Thursday night with the exception of what, Justin?
The fourth weekend of every month. Fourth Thursday of every month, excuse me.
So Justin is absolutely correct. And I believe, maybe I'm mistaken, but I believe that tomorrow night is the 4th Thursday, and it is our Simplex net. So you can join us every Thursday night, except for the 4th Thursday, and it's a Tech Elmer net. And we talk about all kinds of things. It's kind of a round table. Sometimes we do presentations. Sometimes we just get people to ask questions. But tomorrow night is kind of a special night every month for a lot of people. We do a Simplex net on 146.550. And when everything else goes to hell and all the repeaters go down, you'll all want to get on Simplex to talk to each other. So check it out. It's a great net, and you can't always hear everybody, but you can hear some people from your location, and we do some different things to repeat information, and it's a good way to check out your location, check out Simplex, check out VHF. And if you don't know what multipath is, between now and tomorrow night, you have a chance to Google that, and we will definitely have some multi-path going on tomorrow night on our VHF simplex net. So those are our nets. And don't forget parkerradio.org, all one word, parkerradio.org. And I'm not sure if Mike's kind of hid behind my screen there, but hey, Mike, Mike got all the pictures up from our repeater install up on Squaw Mountain and some other events as well. So he's our official PRA photographer, but he also takes care of loading other pictures that members take and send to him. And he keeps track of all that and gets it on the web page. And if you're new to the Parker Radio Association, let me say welcome. And if you want to see what we're all about, go to the gallery section at parkerradio.org and go back a few years and look at some of the pictures from Field Day and different things that we've done over the years. I think you'll get a pretty good feel for who we are and what we do. And just a big thanks to everybody that if you're out at one of our events and you take a picture, you get it to Mike, and Mike gets it on the site and builds a nice gallery. So thank you, Mike. He was waving there a minute ago. There he is. He's waving again. So excellent. Okay, so that's pretty much it for any announcements tonight. What we usually do on our Elmer Night is jump right into the presentation. So Tom, who introduced himself a minute ago, and myself. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself, but you probably saw it on the screen. I am Paul, AC5S. So Tom and I are going to be tag teaming the presentation tonight, and we hope you enjoy it. It's about HF operating. Now, if something we talk about tonight, just kind of, a question in your head pops up about it, and you want to ask that question, at the end of the net, we will take questions that come in on the YouTube side of the house. And if you're on the Google Meets, then you can also ask questions live there. So jot it down if something stirs your thought process there, and or maybe there's something in one of the slides you don't agree with. I think that happened last time. Then we can talk about that too. So this is an Elmer Night. It is our face-to-face Elmer Night. And for those of you that have not been to one of those because you're new, when we get back to meeting live at the library, make sure you attend the face-to-face meeting because it's a really fantastic meeting. We've had several club members that have said, I like the Elmer Night better than I do the regular night. So it is a little more informal and that type of thing, but we cover a lot of ground. So thank you all for being here tonight. So what I'm going to do is, give me just a second, and let's see if we can get. Let me know if you're getting that, Wayne.
Yep, you're good. Well, you're showing the Google Meet.
All right, give me a second here.
All right.
Okay, how are we now? Do you have that?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, well, welcome to the presentation tonight. We're going through HF operations tonight, and we're going to cover antennas and all kinds of things. And I'll go to the next slide. Okay, Tom, you want to start off?
Let me unmute so that you can actually hear me. And we'll begin with talking about the HF amateur bands, which are a dedicated part of the spectrum. It's determined by the ITU in 3 different regions, which is why it says, first off, it's only available to licensed amateur radio operators. And there are small differences between countries. For example, in Europe and England, they have 4 meters, which we do not have at all. There are also small differences between countries. Some of them can add a few K here and there. There's different operational groups allowed or suggested. Some of them actually are required. The FCC breaks it up for us. You can have CW or data versus phone. So you do need to have that information. The way that they're described is by their quote wavelength. In other words, you'll say 40 meters or 20 meters. And the way you get that is you take the frequency in megahertz, divide that into the speed of light in millions of meters per second. That's why you've got the 300 divided by the frequency in megahertz. So, for example, if it's 15 megahertz, that would be 15 to 300, which is 20. The wavelength isn't tremendously accurate, and sometimes it really gets funny. The 80 meter band is also known partially as the 80 and 75 because the lower section, the 80 meter section of CW, and the 75's sideband. Next to you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And interesting enough, when you talk to people about the 80 meter band, some people always refer to it as a 75 meter band, and some people refer to it as 80 meter band. But anyway, these are the frequencies that we have access to that are typically known as HF or high frequency, and HF ranges from 3 to 30 megahertz. Now, technically, if you look at this, 160 meters is technically not HF, but it's still usually thrown into the mix. So we have 160 meters, 80 meters, 40 meters, 20 meters, 15 meters, and 10 meters, and those are the traditional bands. And if you are involved in any of the contests that are put on by ARRL and maybe CQ, and there's some other groups as well, you will find that majority of the contests that are out there operate only on the traditional bands. So, for instance, you won't, if you're doing CQ worldwide, I don't believe they allow 17 meters, 17 meter operation. But the WARC bands are what are known as expansion bands. And you can Google that and look up what WARC is and when it came about. But basically, we picked up 3 additional bands: 30 meters, 17 meters, and 12 meters. And so most of the rest of the world has these bands as well, but not everybody does. So these are the bands that we typically operate on. And let's see if there's anything noteworthy here. I would say not, although one thing, I guess, before I go to the next slide, is that 30 meters for many, many, many years was just not used at all. I don't know that you could ever tune on 30 meters and ever hear any data at all, because it's only data is allowed there. But with the increase in popularity of I think originally JT65 and then FT8 and FT4 and JS8 call and all that, 30 meters is a super popular band, and its propagation characteristics are very, very interesting, especially it kind of falls between 20 and 40. And there are some club members that we have, and I'll mention one here, N4SJW, John, who's my neighbor. He will clearly tell you that is his favorite band for FT8. And for a lot of operators on the data modes, the digital modes, 30 meters is their favorite band. And just one other quick note about 17 meters. I've made quite a few aeronautical mobile contacts on 17 meters. There's quite a bit of aeronautical mobile activity around 18115, 18117. I worked an F-16 going to the New Mexico mothball facility, and it was an old air interdiction fighter that NORAD had, and the guy was taking it to the boneyard to be decommissioned, and he was operating on 18 megahertz, and we talked. He was in coming across Kansas. We talked all the way till he was actually into New Mexico. So some aeronautical mobile on 17 meter that is interesting during the day. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Over to you, Tom.
Before we touch, as somebody pointed out, we did miss 60 meters in there. There is 60 meters, and it's the only channelized one that we have. There's actually 5 channels. You're limited to 100 watts ERP. So you have to take into account your antenna amplification, so to speak, among other things. So the other thing about it is, as I recall, a secondary use. That is, say we can use it, however, it is shared with other services, including the government, and they have primary rights. You are not allowed to interfere. The other thing about it is it doesn't fit in anybody's antennas. It's not a nice, simple little harmonic of anything. So it's actually pretty hard to find a 60-meter antenna if you get a multiband. Okay.
Yes, one other quick comment about 60 meters. And is that it is channelized, like Tom said, and the reason that is because the military, the U.S. military, is channelized on all their HF operations, and this band was opened up to amateurs by direct input and request of the military. And once a year, there is an opportunity for amateurs to communicate with military stations. It's legal to do so on this band, 60 meter band, during their annual test. And the gentleman that was highly instrumental in getting this available to amateurs is with Northcom down in Colorado Springs. He came up and did a fantastic presentation for the club here a couple years ago, and we're going to have him back when we get back to our in-person meetings. But anyway, he talked for about an hour and a half on 60 meters, and it was really amazing. It's a great band. It works very, very well for short hops and medium hops. So thanks for pointing that out, Tom, that we didn't have that on the list. But again, keep in mind it is channelized. Oh, and one other thing. Most of the newer radios, if you're trying to figure out how to operate on 60 meters, let's say after this meeting, or let's say after one of our nets, some club members say, hey, let's go try 60 meters out. Well, half of the people that head that way can't figure out where it is on the radio because it doesn't have a button usually. But most of the manufacturers now are programming the individual channels for 60 meters into a memory position on the radio. So if you've never used the memory channels, the memory slots, the memory positions on your HF rig, get off the VFO setting, go to memory, and that's where you'll find the channels for 60 meters. And they do that so that it kind of takes all the guesswork out of knowing what frequency you're supposed to use. And if you Google 60 meters, there'll be a long explanation about that, what I just said. And we're not going to go into it tonight because Tom and I could talk about 60 meters all night and then we wouldn't cover anything else. But Google 60 meters and read how it's set up as a channelized band, and then look for it on your radio. See if you can find it on your HF radio, because if it's not in a memory position, then usually you have to program in the specific frequencies, and that's where it takes a little bit of study before you actually do that. Okay, go ahead, Tom, back to you.
Okay, let's hit off on the ionosphere. And actually, Paul, I'm sorry, the first one is slightly wrong. The ion is the atom that's left after you strip off an electron. It's actually a positive charged atom because the electron's been knocked away, and eventually will come back and they'll be happy and join together again. The ionosphere is 30 to 400 miles high. There is atmosphere there. That is to say, there are atoms of oxygen and nitrogen and helium and hydrogen, but it's, shall we say, somewhat thin. There's very little pressure and it drops rapidly. That actually impacts the business about the Paul or I are going to get into about D, E, and F layers down the road. It's the most interesting area of the atmosphere for us because of propagation. Skywave long distance propagation is done with the aid of the ionosphere. And how well it performs its job is dependent upon things like the solar activity. We right now are just barely coming out of the bottom of a 11-year cycle, which technically is 22, if you can believe it, because it flips back and forth. But it's an 11-year cycle of sunspots. We are at the worst time for propagation because we don't have a lot of solar activity, sunspots. But it's getting better. The season makes a difference. Among other things, it has to do with the way the face of the Earth is pointing towards the sun. In the winter, we're in the northern hemisphere, we're pointed a bit away from the sun. The sun is coming at a different angle. The other thing is, of course, the time of day, because the ionosphere is altered by primarily ultraviolet light from the sun. There's other factors, but primarily ultraviolet light. And obviously at night, you don't have a heck of a lot of light from the sun hitting the ionosphere.
And I'll just, and I'll make another quick comment there is that if you get your DXCC award, which has worked 100 DX entities, if you get your DXCC award, like so many people in the club have been actually getting the certificate, they've completed their 100 countries during the bottom of the cycle. I think that's a pretty darn good deal. I think it says a lot about individuals as operators. So congratulations to those people who are getting DXCC during this time. We do salute you absolutely positively. Okay, so the ionosphere can refract or bend radio waves. When the radio waves bend, and they bend a certain amount, they return to Earth. The other way, radio waves just travel off into space. The highest frequency where a signal is reflected back to Earth is called the critical frequency. Amateur radio contacts up to 2,500 miles are possible with one skip off the ionosphere or multiple skips. And worldwide communications greater than 2,500 miles use several skips or multi-hops when conditions are right. Tom.
I was going to add a comment to that, and that is he's talking about refracting. Very often people say it reflects. It does not. The only one that actually reflects is sporadic E. Through the ionosphere, it refracts the same way light is bent in a glass of water or through a lens. And I think you might see that. Can you see two red dots on that thing? I'm hoping you can see the little crystal. Maybe not.
Yeah, I can, but I don't know if they'll be able to see it on YouTube.
Okay, well, there are two. This happens to be a piece of calcite or Icelandic spar. And it, strangely enough, to light, this acts the same way the ionosphere acts for radio waves. And that is, it splits it into two. For that reason, you'll see in the reports that you get out of like CU on the ionosphere. It has the ordinary and extraordinary, the O and the E, and there's different maximum usable frequencies. Well, that's because the ionosphere splits your radio wave into two, and they actually go different directions because, in effect, the index of refraction through the ionosphere is different. When they're talking about the waves that are refracted, we call them sky waves for obvious reasons. And there's two things that become important when you're trying to do skywave propagation. First one is frequency, and the second is the level of ionization. In effect, the higher the frequency, the less it's bent. And the highest usable frequency to a desired location is known as the maximum usable frequency. The greater the level of ionization, the more it's bent. So between frequency and ionization, that controls how much it's bent. Paul?
Yeah, and the maximum usable frequency is important to know, especially if you're trying to get to a particular point somewhere around the globe. Okay. So here we have a chart that shows an HF signal below maximum usable frequency, and it is refracted and bounces around and allows you to contact hams in other parts of the world based on the hops. We see a signal that is above the maximum usable frequency, and it goes through the ionosphere and is refracted to some degree as it moves through the ionosphere. And then we look at a VHF or even a UHF signal, and they pretty much go straight through the ionosphere without any refraction. Tom.
The ionization level does obviously correspond very closely to sun activity, including the sunspots, because the thing that really drives it is the ultraviolet light coming from the sun. And it turns out that sunspots, which follow an 11-year cycle, going up and down, the more sunspots, likely the more ultraviolet radiation, the greater the ionization you have. The number of sunspots can range from 0, and we've had several months of 0 sunspots recently, up to 150. I think right now we have 2 on the facing the face of the sun is facing the Earth at this particular moment. The other thing you can see is the solar flux, which is 10.4 megahertz, I think. Anyhow, it's a numerical value. It ranges from approximately 60 to approximately 250. 250 would be fantastic. Right now, we are sitting, I believe, about 72 or 73. In effect, anything below 70 is considered bad. Anything around 72, 73 is marginal. And as the number goes up, your DX communication is going to go up.
And then if as we're talking about solar flux and solar index and stuff like that, let me throw out an individual that you might want at some point. If you want to know more information about this particular part of the presentation, because we don't get into it in a lot of depth, but Wayne, N0AD, who's running the show tonight behind the scenes, Wayne has a really, I consider, high level knowledge in regard to solar indexes, flux, and various things. So if that interests you and you'd like to have a little more practical, real-time knowledge about these things, at some point grab Wayne and he can give you more information. Okay, the solar flux. A high solar flux means higher maximum usable frequency. And we need high numbers for the higher frequencies like 10 and 15 meters to open up. And we need lower levels for the lower frequencies like 160 and 80. so that they kind of work in reverse. And right now with where we're at in the solar cycle, 10 and 15 meters right now are almost useless, with some very rare openings occasionally.
Let's talk about the layers. Interestingly enough, the first ones discovered were the F layers, and they're generally split into two, F1 and F2. Below that is the E layer, and below that is the D layer. Paul, why don't you explain the D layer?
Is that on the next slide?
That's on the next slide, or would you like me to?
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. I was distracted there. This live stuff, it's a little hard sometimes. Go right ahead. You're on a roll. Go ahead.
Okay. The D layer is the lowest one. It exists really during the day only. I mean, it disappears at night. It is caused by ultraviolet light, and it's because it's lower, it tends to be ionizing nitrogen and oxygen. The nice thing about nitrogen and oxygen, and it's much denser at that point, although it's not what you'd call dense. This is way above the level of the Earth, but because it is comparatively denser, once a bit of ultraviolet knocks an electron off of one of the atoms, it's real close and it recombines. That's why it disappears at night, because unless it has a constant influx of ultraviolet, it's going to go away very quickly, because everything recombines. All the ions and their free electrons merge back, and you just have atoms, which don't do much of anything. You are up, Paul, for the E's.
Okay, E layer is still an area of the ionosphere that is a little bit still like parts of our ocean, right? There's still a lot of stuff about the E layer that's not known. There are people that spend their entire lifetimes trying to figure out the E layer, and they were back in the 40s, and they still are today. But it's thought to be caused by wind shear. Now, it's not usually there. The E layer comes and goes, and it can last from seconds to a few minutes to hours in some cases. It's most common from May through July. It usually affects 50 megahertz or 6 meters and below. And that's why you'll find a lot of hams that are really into 6 meters, 50 megahertz, I should say, that really spend their May through July chasing down these openings when on the E layer. And it's rare for at 144 megahertz and above, but it does occur occasionally. So that is the E layer. Back to you, Tom.
Some additional thoughts on the E. Wind shear, there's also some discussion that tropospheric lightning can contribute to it, and also meteor transmission. When we have meteor showers, they're out looking for what they call sporadic E. It also, and I'm hoping Wayne will correct me every time I do something wrong here. My understanding is that it is mostly electrons rather than ions that are causing the thing, and it's causing reflection rather than refraction. I believe one thing that you can also find out about sporadic E is it tends to flutter. When you listen to it, it has a particular sound. Let's move on to the one that's probably the most important one that we talk about, and that is the F layers, F1 and F2. That is the one that we depend upon for long distance, for DX communication. Again, it's caused by ultraviolet light from the sun, but it's shorter waves of ultraviolet. It occurs very high up in the ionosphere. It forms during the day, and it slowly dissipates at night as the free electrons join up with their ions, and they're back to being just neutral atoms. The Reason for the 2 layers, my understanding, is that it's different wavelengths of ultraviolet that cause that. And I see we have a comment from Scott, which we'll pick up in just a moment. The thing about it is the maximum usable frequency does vary considerably with the ionization layer. At night, it will, because of the way that it operates, it will actually move away from the Earth. If you look at it from the side, you would see that it kind of is an egg shape. So that's one reason why nighttime propagation is really nice, because you've got it further higher up, so you get a longer bounce. And I think what Scott was pointing out is that I believe it's May and June in Northern Hemisphere, November and December for the E layer. Thank you, Scott.
Yes.
EAB.
Yes, absolutely.
Your turn, Paul. You get to have the next one.
All right. So, well, we call the 160 meters. We're going to go through each band real quick. I think that's always useful. The 160 meter band is the top, called the top band. Anyway, I have worked all states on 160 meters with phone voice. So not trying to brag, because other people in our club have done the same thing with digital, but it takes some work and it takes some time. And I had a 400-foot antenna when I did it. But 160 meters is probably my favorite band. I love 160 meters. The antenna that I currently use is very, very, very compromised. Very compromised, but I still get probably 15 to 50 good 160 meter contacts every month or so in the winter. And there's a really good net on 160 meters every night that'll usually start in about October, run through maybe April. So you can certainly work 160 meters, and some nights it's absolutely as quiet as the W0 CFI repeater. It's amazing. During the day, it's really more of a local band out to about a few hundred miles. It's not very good for DX at all. But at night, it is potentially a very, very good band for long distances. And so working all states 160 from Colorado is a challenge for 2 or 3 states that are on the East Coast, and Hawaii becomes very, very difficult from where we're at. And but it can be done. It took me 4 years, but I was able to get that done. Okay, it's often very noisy, a lot of static, especially in the summer months. I don't even tune to 160 meters in the summer. It's just way, way too noisy with all the static crashes from the thunderstorms around the U.S. It's a very challenging DX band. Most of the DX done on the 160 meter band is CW, and most people do run amplifiers. That's pretty common on the voice nets anyway, that are on 160 meters. Antennas can be difficult because of the size. Again, a lot of us run compromised antennas on 160 meters. And but if you can put up a full size 160 meter antenna, then more power to you, and certainly you'll make more contacts. And just a quick note: if you're a technician, there's no operating privileges on 160 meters, so this is a good reason for you to upgrade. And also, if you are on any of the worked all states nets on 160 meters, Colorado is a prize. Colorado is difficult for a lot of the East Coast stations to work, and not so much West Coast, but certainly East Coast. And so when you get on 160 meters on a worked all states net, and you're from Colorado, you will get a lot of calls. And that doesn't mean you can hear everybody, but there's a good chance that you'll be able to hear quite a few stations and then work them. So anyway, just give that a thought. If you're wanting to get your feet wet on 160 meters, get an antenna up and get on one of the 160 meters worked all states nets, and you'll be a very popular person when you check in, because you'll get a lot of calls for sure. So 160 meters, the top band, my favorite band. Over to you, Tom.
Commenting on that, think what propagation is like on the AM radio dial, and it's pretty darn close to 160 meters. The other thing is, Paul will be putting up a quarter wave vertical in his backyard for 160 any day now, which I think, well, you're going to slip that up there, aren't you, Paul? That's only 130 feet high, right?
Well,
So,
I would love to, man. That would be fantastic. I don't think that would be allowed, probably, but you know.
well, John might have something to say about that. Okay, let's talk about 80 meters. 80 meters is a daytime band and a nighttime. It's both. There's an awful lot of local nets during the day because you're only going to go a couple hundred miles at most. You're not going to get long distance. But at night, particularly when you've got some solar flux going on, you can cover the world. Yes, it is extremely noisy in the summer months because all those wonderful thunderstorms going on out there, like I had earlier tonight, and boy, did I disconnect antennas. You can hear the things crashing all over the place. You can hear a line of thunderstorms 200 miles away. There's a tremendous amount of energy. So that is one of the problems of using 80 meters in the summer. It is a challenging DX band. As I've mentioned earlier, the upper part, people will call it 75 meters. That's the phone band. Yeah, particularly again at night, there's an awful lot of rag chewing. There's an awful lot of nets. Some of them are almost embarrassing, to be honest with you. And there's been some jokes about 80 meters being where all the old men nets are. But I don't think you should ignore that band just because of that. Obviously, the antennas are going to be hard. Dipole's 133 feet long. So you have to have a little bit of real estate to do that. Also, the band itself is wide enough that to cover the whole thing is difficult, even with a 133-foot dipole out there. To cover both 80 and 75 meters, to cover the whole band, becomes a real challenge. You're going to end up using a tuner on at least part of it. The only technician abilities that you have is you've got between basically you got 75 kilohertz of CW only if you're a tech, and that's it's right at the top of the CW range on the 80 meter band. Paul?
Well, I don't know if I said this, but 80 meters is my favorite band. No, wait. Did I say that about 160?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, 80 meters is my second favorite band, and I always recommend to individuals that get their HF ticket, get a general or extra, get some kind of antenna up on 80 meters, even if it's highly compromised, because 80 meters is just a great band. It's a lot of fun. There's some worked all states nets on 80 meters. And after I worked all states on 160, I thought, well, what the heck? I'll try to work all states on 80 meters. And that didn't take as long, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And there's, again, some states that are very, very difficult to get. But get on 80. You will not be disappointed. It is a lot of fun. Several of the people that are on tonight, Justin and Wayne, we jump on 80 quite a bit after our analog nets and digital nets and stuff in the winter time, and you're all welcome to jump on there with us. We love 80 meters. Justin loves 80 meters. Okay, let's go to the next one. Who's up next? Am I up next?
Yeah.
40 meters. So 40 meters is one of those bands that is always open somewhere. It is. I mean, during the daytime, it can be a band, but it can go out to 1,000 miles or more. At nighttime, it's definitely worldwide. Not every country has the same band privileges that we do on the 40-meter band, but they're pretty close. And it's a very reliable band. There are a lot of people that will tell you that it's their favorite band, and I think the reason that's the case is because it's always open somewhere. You can always get on 40 and communicate with somebody, always. So even though a lot of people do consider this kind of a nighttime band, just remember that when we do field day in the summer, we work 40 meters usually all day long. And is it more difficult during the day? Yes, but we always make contacts throughout the day. So it's not just a nighttime band, but it's a fantastic band at night. There's not a week that goes by that there's not a Russian station or potentially some other station with their signal come across the pole on 80, on 40. So it's a good DX band. Antennas are manageable. People can put them actually in their attic, and certainly you can get them in most yards, even Highlands Ranch and some of the areas where there's some heavy restrictions. We've put in stealth antennas for people, and definitely positively got them on the air on 40. Verticals are absolutely fantastic. If you have a good radial field, a 40-meter vertical is fairly short, 23 feet or so, maybe, and up to 30 feet. And with a good radial field, you can talk worldwide. I would say 90+% of my contacts on 40 meters are on my vertical antenna. And then if you want to do a directional antenna, a beam as we call it, you can do that on 40 meters, especially if you're running a hex beam or something like that. That's a little smaller. It's certainly more manageable. If you get into the full size beams for 40 meters, they're pretty big and have a significant amount of wind loading. But for the most part, you can run wire antennas, verticals, beams, everything on 40. So definitely you want to get on 40, absolutely, positively. And as a CW, there's a very small section that's available to you in the CW portion of the band. Tom, over to you.
So let's go to 30 meters, which is one of the work bands that stands, by the way, for the World Administrative Radio Conference, I believe. Hey, I got it right. The so-called work bands came about in 1979 is when we got them. The thing about 30 is it's only 50 kilohertz wide. Its propagation is very similar to 40 meters, which means during the day, yes, you can get 1,000 miles. During night, particularly when you start getting some flux in the ionosphere, you can get some really good propagation. But it is CW and data only. There is no phone whatsoever. And there are no technician privileges in that band. As so many of the work bands, well, I think all of them, there's sort of a gentleman's agreement not to do any contesting in them because they are so tiny. 50 kilohertz is not big at all. The interesting thing about it is it's closest one to WWV. I always wanted to have something around 10 megahertz, and that's what it is. And Paul, let's pass it on to you for 20 meters, which is my favorite band.
Well, Tom, we did skip 60, by the way, but I think we already kind of covered that. So we'll we'll table that to maybe the after the presentation discussion again. And let's go to 20 meters. And it's Tom's favorite band. It's, well, quite honestly, it's a lot of amateur radio operators. It's their favorite band as well. It's fairly wide. We have a lot of bandwidth up there. During the day, anywhere from 500 miles to worldwide. During the maximum solar period on the 11-year sunspot cycle, 20 meters is very often open 24 hours a day. I have worked Europe, Asia, all over the world, at 2 a.m. in the morning. So it will get better as we move further into the solar cycle. And right now, even though right now we kind of look at 20 meters as a day band, which it is, you can make fantastic contacts during the day all over the world when the propagation's right. But we've all been noticing the last 6 months, maybe 8 months, maybe closer to a year, that 20 meters has continued to stay open at night, in some cases up till 9, 10, 11 o'clock p.m. And
even later.
Or even later, and during those nighttime hours, propagation has been really, really good. There was a gentleman the other day that I talked with that had worked 50 countries because of his work schedule. He didn't get off work until 8 p.m. and he'd worked 50 DX entities after 9 p.m. on 20 meters the last 6 months. So certainly a fantastic band during the day. It will get better at night, but some nights it's very good right now. And most everybody considers it probably the best DX band that we have. Now, antennas are extremely manageable, whether it's a dipole, a vertical, a in-fed wire antenna, an off-center fed dipole, a traditional dipole, a directional antenna of some type. Whatever the case is, you can manage, almost everybody can manage a 20-meter antenna. Even a 20-meter stealth antenna is very, very, very possible in almost every situation with HOAs. I show on this slide that technicians have no operating. No, they're not able to operate at all on 20 meters. I for some reason thought they had some CW privileges, but if this slide is correct and you're a technician, you definitely want to upgrade, because this is going to be, it is a good band now. It's where all of us hang out during the day when we're on HF, and early evenings and late evenings, as Wayne said, in some cases. But it's just going to get better every single month. It's going to get better until it is open 24 hours a day, and I know everybody's looking forward to that. Okay, Tom.
20 meters under the new proposed allocations from the ARRL that they're submitting to the FCC. 20 meters still will have no technician privileges. They're expanding technician in other parts, but not in 20. And Paul, I'm going to ask if you would kindly take 17 and 15, because apparently somebody's knocking at my door.
You bet. You better check that out for sure. It's a little late to be knocking on people's doors. But anyway, 17 meters, I already mentioned that it's a fairly good aeronautical mobile band. It's also, for those people that have never been on 17 meters, it's kind of it's a surprise to a lot of people when they get up here, because even though we'll talk about 10 meters and 15 meters here in a minute, and those bands are not very usable right now during the part of the 11-year cycle that we're in, 17 meters is almost every day is open somewhere. And during the day, you can certainly communicate hundreds of miles, in some cases worldwide. And those people that are running a lot of FT8 right now can attest to that. At night, when we have high sunspot levels, when we get back to that point, we're getting to the peak of the sunspot cycle, then this band will be open at night as well. But right now, it's not open at night very often at all. Antennas, extremely manageable. Verticals, very, very good on this band. And beams, directional antennas are manageable. It is an expansion band, as we talked about. Technicians have no operating, they're not, no operations permitted for technicians on this band. But if you want to check out Aeronautical Mobile, it's certainly a band to do that on. Around 18.115, 116, 117 is where the Aeronautical Mobiles usually hang out. And if you're operating a lot of digital right now, wow, what a great band during the day. There's a lot of people who just hang out on 17 meters all day and make hundreds and hundreds of contacts. Okay, 15 meters. It is, for a lot of amateurs, 15 meters, is their favorite band. Always has been, always will be. As we move closer to the peak of the sunspot cycle, then this band will become extremely active. And I'm not so sure there are days where it's still open. It's just that there's not a lot of people up there on 15 meters right now. But the reason I know it's active is because when you get these de-expeditions out there that pop up, we'll have 2 or 3 more this year. They're always on 15 meters, and you can always make a contact with them. So that tells me that the band's open a little bit more than what we think it is. But in any case, hundreds of miles to worldwide during the day when the sunspot cycle supports it. At night, it can be open 24 hours a day, or it can certainly be open till very, very late into the evening, again, with higher sunspot levels. And it's a great DX band when we get in those peak solar cycle years. And if you do want to work any of the de-expeditions and you're not finding them on the lower bands, sometimes flip up to 15 meters. You may very well find them up there. Every de-expedition since the beginning of time has a station set up, and they always work 15 meters. Antennas are extremely manageable. Verticals are absolutely excellent. I made 6 or 7 contacts here a couple of weeks ago with my vertical antenna, my 4BTV. There was a slight opening, and it got in there and just boom, 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 worked 5 or 6 or 7 stations. And after that, the band went away. But I still made those contacts, and they were all continental U.S. contacts, with I think maybe one in Mexico and one in Canada as well. Technicians, you do have privileges on 15 meters in the CW portion of the band. Tom, are you back?
I am.
Would you like to take 12 meters?
I'll take 12 because that's an ugly one. No, I'm kidding. 12 meters is it's another one of those work bands that were granted in 1979. There's doesn't seem to be a tremendous amount of activity on it, but if there is, then yeah, it goes during the day from a few hundred miles to worldwide. The night, only when you've got a really active F layer is it going to be doing you any good. So in, say, 5.5 years, 12 meters is going to be a great band. It, by the way, is only 100 kilohertz wide, so it's not real wide, but it does allow both CW and phone operation. It's split. There are no technician privileges there. The nice thing about it is the dipole is only 18 feet long, so you can swing one of those without too much trouble almost anywhere, even in a homeowners association. Also, because of the length, beams are very, very helpful. A lot of the multi-band verticals these days include 12 meters, and the other work bands, it's the 60 that they leave off. And thank you, Paul. By the way, it was somebody trying to sell me insecticide or pesticides treatments for my house, so I send them over to Dan's. If you want to go ahead and pick up the 10 meter.
I will. I'll make one other quick comment about 12 meters. I think it was sometime in December last year, 2019, we all jumped on the HF frequencies after our Tuesday night analog net, and we had probably 8 or 9, maybe 10 stations on, and we were trying to work each other locally. We're all kind of spread out in the south part of the metro area down here, from Castle Rock to Elizabeth and over in Aurora and that type of thing, and all PRA members. And I remember one evening we tried 20 meters and 80, and we tried everything, and 10, and it just wasn't working. It was just one of those nights where there was not any band that was going to cooperate. And somebody said, well, let's try 12 meters. And we were like, okay, well, let's give 12 meters a try. And for whatever reason that night, I think 8 out of 10 people, we all were able to communicate on 12 meters. It was really kind of weird, but certainly will be open during high sunspot years and sometimes after analog nets as well. 10 meters. Wow, what a great band. During the high sunspot years, during the peak of the solar cycle, this is a favorite band for many, many amateurs. And a lot of people have 10-meter mobile radios sitting in their closet. And they had them, they bought them during the last sunspot cycle, during the last peak. And they once we started on the downhill slide, they took them out of their vehicles and put them back in the closets. So, which is where they'll stay here for another few more years. But at the peak of the cycle, you can talk all over the world on 10 meters during the day for sure. And at night, we can get hours and hours of propagation as well. So this is a fantastic band. We have a pretty significant amount of bandwidth up there. During the off-peak years, like we're in right now, due to certain conditions that occur, there are times when this band opens up. And when it opens up, you can do the same thing now that you will be able to do in 4 or 5 years from now, which is make some very significant contacts, hundreds, if not thousands of miles, sometimes on very low power on this band. So watch the beacons. This is a band that there are a lot of beacons on. And if you listen to those beacons, you can get an idea whether or not the band is open or not. And when it is, or DX clusters, very, very important that you all learn how to use DX clusters effectively. If you're chasing DX and you're chasing band openings. So if you see a bunch of stations popping up, maybe following the gray line, maybe other reasons. Whatever the case is, when 10 meters opens up, you may have a few minutes, you may have a few hours, but you certainly can make some really cool contacts and then brag about it on the net the following night. Now, it's very quiet. It's almost like a FM repeater in some situations. Modest stations can work worldwide DX. The old realistic 10-meter mobile that put out 10 watts or 25 watts sometimes can easily work Eastern European stations. And you have a lot of bandwidth up there. The modes that are available to us as amateurs: sideband, CW, RIDI, PSK31, FT8, FT4, slow scan TV, on and on and on. Anything you want to work up there mode wise, you can go for it. And good luck to you now, but you won't need luck here in a few years. Back to you, Tom.
Just wanted to add one comment about the 10-meter band. That is the only one that technicians get to have phone privileges on in the HF region. They get to have some phone privileges from 28,300, 28,500 kilohertz, and they don't get to have CW. So that's the one spot that you get to have phone privileges on an HF band. So if you don't go ahead and start working on your general, and you ought to, I'm saying very loudly, but if you don't, I'll tell you what, wait a few years, you might actually be able to do something in 10-meter phone. At least it'll be fun. Let's talk about what you can do on HF. And the number one that I like is rag chewing. There is an awful lot of rag chewing going on, and it is you can find nets on almost any topic that you want. You can simply have a conversation with somebody, just simply calling CQ or answering the CQ. That is one of the most enjoyable activities for me. And I should point out, as far as operating activities, there's just as many operating activities as there are different operating activities as there are hams out there. DXing, that of course is going for that distant station. There's both people that are trying for the awards, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment, but also the ones that try to figure out that they can go 7,000 miles on 2 watts. Well, that gets bested by the guy that did 7,000 miles on 1 watt. There's kind of a active QRP competition going on in DXing. Of course, contesting, there's a lot of that. And when people say that the bands are dead, they're wrong. What you need to do is just go find out where the contest is. Not that you have to listen to it, but it's less the bands are dead than people think the bands are dead and are not getting on the radio. When we have contests, it is I'll talk about that in a moment, sir. When we get on when you get on the contest, ready or whatever, you will definitely, very definitely find out there's a lot of activity, a lot of propagation, a lot of good stuff going. Yes, there are awards. The DX Century Club, where they we often say countries, but actually it's entities that have been broken down. For example, I'm sure that Hawaii is its own entity. I'm not pursuing it, so I don't honestly care. But Hawaii, I believe, is a completely separate DX entity, and I think Puerto Rico is too, even though they're part of the United States. The WS has worked all states. The WAC has worked all countries, and there are awards of all sorts. Yes, there are special event stations that commemorate almost everything that you can imagine. Interestingly enough, 2 weeks ago, although it was not publicized because it was the first time, the Freemasons had a special event station down in Colorado Springs at the Grand Lodge building, commemorating their 159th anniversary. They're going to do it next year, and hopefully they'll get some more people involved and some better publicity going out on the thing. There's other kinds of special event stations going on all over the place. QRP is reduce your power. That is, I believe that they like to think of it as less than 5 watts. If you're talking sideband or CW, I don't know. I do have what does not qualify as a QRP radio because it's 20 watts, but what the heck? It's people, it started to become really popular quite a few years ago. A lot of magazine articles. It's continued its popularity, although it does seem like it does change in how well it's approached depending upon the sunspot cycle. When it's a lousy cycle, there are fewer people doing QRP. Oh, yeah, there's nets, and some of them are very formal. Some are extremely informal. Formal ones, for example, there's the Salvation Army net that one of them is coming out of the southeast United States, and it's a digital net, and they run every kind of digital mode you can imagine. It's running on 20 meters, just below the FT8 region. And I'll tell you what, if you get on there, you can see every kind of digital mode in the world because they run through all of them. It's very interesting. Modes, single sideband. CW Riddy, PSK 31, FT8, JT65, Olivia, which I happen to like very much, SoScan TV, and of course, Paul's favorite mode, Vanessa. But I don't think his wife knows about that one. Vanessa is not a digital mode, regardless of what Paul is putting in his slide. I'm sorry. Contestia I can buy. Throb. Now, maybe Throb's related to Vanessa. I don't know. Yeah, digital modes are extremely popular on HF. It's your fault, Paul. Digital modes, frankly, that's what I do most of the time. I prefer PSK 31. I have been doing. Yeah, thank you, Ray. Paul, as soon as I'm through, you have to explain the difference between Vanessa and Olivia. I do Olivia, I do Contestia, and it's. I really do enjoy that. I've had some nice long rag chews with guys. I think the furthest one I did was from Brooklyn. And strangely enough, when he typed, it happened to be in, we started off in PSK 31 and went to Olivia. We transitioned modes in the middle of it. When he did that, he had this strange accent, but that may be because he was from Brooklyn. Paul, please explain the difference between Olivia and Vanessa.
Just different digital modes, man. That's all they are. Okay.
Well, grab the next one, sir.
All right. Just different digital modes. Okay. So we'll finish up here with HF operating by talking a little bit about, we talked about 60 meters being channelized, and we talked about the military using HF and sideband specifically, and that's all channelized, but it's not channelized for hams, so we can go to whatever frequency we want, which is kind of cool. Watch out for your band edges, right? Your sideband signal is a certain width, and try to do the best that you can to stay off of the band edges, so you don't some of your signal doesn't get off the out of the bands, which is not good. And some radios like ICOMs have a nice little beep that tells you when you leave the band, but that still doesn't tell you when you're close to the band edges. Okay, this is kind of important. Nobody owns a frequency. Now, you're right, Tom. Some of those guys on 80 meters think they own a frequency, and they get on there and almost broadcast every night. But the fact of the matter is that nobody owns a frequency. Avoid interfering with other stations. Don't tune up on the air. And don't pick a operating frequency that's is within 3 kilohertz or 6 kilohertz or whatever of another station, because it will cause them interference. And always ask if the frequency is in use before transmitting. Always, if you're listening to a frequency and you listen for a couple minutes and you don't hear anybody. I can't tell you how many times people just start calling CQ and they're right on top of a net. And the reason they didn't hear anything for 2 minutes is because you couldn't hear the station you couldn't hear the station that was transmitting. But somebody else is listening to that station. So the point being is that always ask if the frequency is in use. If you're on top of a net, somebody will politely come back and say, yes, it is. We're in the middle of a net, and then you'll know to go to another frequency. Learn to use standard phonics for all call signs. I guess that line is kind of interesting if you're talking to DX stations that are not using standard phonic, but that's okay. You'll just hear people use all different types of non-standard words, but try to use the standard ones if you can. In most cases, Alpha Charlie 5 Sierra is Sierra, but sometimes it's Alpha Charlie 5 Sugar. So, and sometimes it's AE2 Liberty. But in any case, it's probably better to use the standard words for call signs. And always use your full call sign. Sometimes when you're on there trying to work a contest, you'll hear people give out maybe 2 letters of their call, and they think that's going to be shorter and quicker and will catch the attention of the station that's calling CQ. And in a contest, sometimes it does, actually, but it's not the really proper way to operate. Tom, over to you.
A couple more comments. First off, when you do ask if the frequency is in use, this is to make Justin happy, and actually it is correct. You should give your call sign. You are transmitting, give your call sign. Yeah, question he asked in the chat window was, what about staying inside your license level? Can you answer a DX station in the extra portion of the band if you are a general? The answer is your license limitation is your transmission, not your reception. So this also comes about because you have some foreign stations that have a wider band than we do. You can hear them outside of our band as long as you stay transmitting within your privileges. Are you going to nod your head, Justin? Did I say that right? Hey, how about that? Okay.
Well, also, you might want to mention that's why in some cases, not always, and we're going to touch base on this in a minute, but that's sometimes why you use split, because you're listening outside of the amateur U.S. amateur band, but you're transmitting in the band. So that's sometimes why split is used. Not the only reason, but one of the reasons why splits are used during contests. Okay, back to you, Tom.
Okay, phone operation. On HF is yes, although I'm beginning to think FT8 is going to overtake phone just because of the number of people doing FT8. When you're doing sideband on lower, you traditionally for phone, in other words, you're actually talking on 160/80. Well, anything less than 40 meters and down, you use lower sideband. 20 meters and up, you traditionally use upper sideband. The way I can always remember this is because I had an explanation at one point where the conversion for sideband depended upon the second IF, which was tend to be like 9 or 11 megahertz. And if the frequency that you were receiving is lower than your second IF, you would use lower sideband because the sideband, the detection worked better. And if it was above that, you used upper sideband because it worked better there. I don't know how true that is, but that's what it is. However, for digital, I don't care what band you're on, upper sideband is what's preferred all the way across.
And since we talked about 60 meters,
right.
60 meters is always upper sideband because it was a collaboration with the military that got amateurs that particular band, and the military only uses upper sideband. So it's upper sideband on 60 meters.
Thank you, Paul. I keep forgetting 60. Sorry about that.
Okay.
You're up next, sir.
Okay, so if you want to make a QSO, you want to make a contact on HF, there's a couple ways you can do it. If somebody's calling CQ, you can start with answering that CQ. So if Dan into SRK is calling CQ, then John in for SJW can answer the CQ by saying, into SRK, this is in for SJW in Denver, how copy? There's different ways to do it. There's not a formal way in the book or in part 97, but basically if someone's calling CQ, you can, when they release the mic and they want somebody to contact them, then you can do one of many different ways, but you basically want to state your call sign and tell the station you hear them in some way, shape, or form, and initiate the conversation that way. So there's different ways you can listen to how other people do it and come up with your own Style is fine. One of the things that the author of this particular presentation, and I would concur, is that as soon as the station calling CQ unkeys their mic, the sooner you can key your mic, the better. Because in a lot of cases, there's going to be 3 or 4 people going back to that station. And there are different techniques, and we're not going to get into all of them tonight. Sometimes if there's what's called a pileup, if there are lots of stations going back to the CQ station, maybe delaying is a technique that works. But for the most part, as soon as the station is finished calling CQ, you need to key your mic up and give your call sign. And that's the best way to start that communications process. Now, if you don't hear anybody calling CQ, but you would like to communicate with someone, you can call CQ. And you develop your own style. There are many, many different ways to do it. The way I do it is I say CQ, CQ, CQ. This is Alpha Charlie 5 Sierra in Colorado on 20 meters calling CQ, CQ, CQ. And you can repeat that about 3 times. And then I usually say at the end, I'm listening. And then I unkey and I wait for someone to come back to me. If I don't hear anybody, then I do it again. CQ, CQ, CQ. This is Alpha Charlie 5 Sierra calling CQ 20 meters, calling CQ 20 meters. Hello, 20 meters. This is Alpha Charlie 5 Sierra calling CQ from Colorado and standing by. That's how I would do it. Now, you don't have to call CQ for 2 minutes, but you do need to call CQ multiple times. And there's quite a few people that will tell you that if you're really wanting to make a contact, you call CQ until somebody responds. I've called CQ for an hour, for 30 minutes. Whatever the case is, you keep calling and sooner or later somebody will run across you on the frequency and maybe they'll spot you on a DX cluster and then you'll have a lot of people coming back to you. But anyway, keep the CQs fairly short in terms of, 3 or 4 times, call CQ 3 or 4 times and then break. Say you're listening, say you're standing by, and develop your own style. There is no right or wrong way. I would say the only wrong way would be to call CQ continuously for 5 minutes without unkeying your mic. That's probably the wrong way. But, but there's several different ways to do it. And you can listen to how other people do it. And again, come up with your own style. And again, there's no wrong way to do it. And you'll figure it out once you start doing that. And hopefully once you start calling CQ, someone will hear you and they will come back to you. And then you can have a conversation. Now, if the propagation is pretty good and you're calling CQ on 20 meters, and how do you know the band's in pretty good shape? Well, you're hearing a lot of people on the band, up and down the band, a lot of people talking. So the band's pretty decent and you want to make some contacts. Then once you initiate a contact after you call CQ, you can do one of 2 things. You can decide, hey, I'd like to talk to this person for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever the case is. Or you can simply say, hey, thanks for the contact. I'm going to try to get some more stations. Have a great day, 73, and then move on to the next station. Because at some point you may have 3 or 4 waiting in line to talk to you. And if that's the case, you can work 40, 50 stations an hour easily by just simply after you're finished saying QRZ or saying CQ, CQ, and then the next station will jump in and you'll make that contact and then you'll move on to the next one, and the next one. So But if you decide you want to just have a longer conversation with anyone, feel free to do that as well. There's no reason that you can't do that. Okay, Tom.
I wanted to add a couple comments. One,
Yes.
it's really handy when you're calling CQ if you would slip in your call sign more than once, not only phonetic but even just straight, because you can have band conditions where you can't quite catch it and it's hard to respond back. If the guy only says N2 SR, you don't really know how to come back. Yeah, so it's nice to hear it a couple times to get a chance. The other thing is if you're contesting, it's really handy if you throw the word contest in the middle of your CQ so that the people who are not contesting don't respond back to you because they probably aren't logging it necessarily. They may be looking for a rag chew, and if you're contesting, you're not interested in that. So it's kind of nice to throw that one, particularly if you're in a particular contest, you'll hear them saying that this is the California QSO or whatever their particular contest is that they're running. It's kind of nice to hear that too on the call. DX QSOs. Okay. Listen first, because you're going to find out a lot of information about the station you're trying to call by listening to other conversations. You don't have to have him repeat things. You also are going to find out what the heck his interest is. Is he trying to get as many stations as he can, or is he looking truthfully for a rag chew? You don't know. So please listen. Besides that, you should always listen before you transmit. Don't try to rag chew if you got somebody that's trying to do either a contest or you're just handing out signal reports or they're just trying to make the maximum number of contacts. And yes, it is true that we lie every dang time in a contest and everybody is a 5'9". I don't care what you actually have. They're a 5'9", and that's really just to satisfy the requirements that you exchange some information to make it a full QSO. You have to have something more than just your call sign so you can lie through your teeth and say, yep, you're 5'9", or sometimes you'll even hear 599 and it's not a CW, but it's 5'9", it's there. When you have somebody that's DX, it's a popular station, listen to their instructions. Very often they will try to work what Paul was talking about, split, where they are transmitting on one frequency and where you're listening, and they are listening on a separate frequency for you to transmit. So you need to listen to them. That way they can, there's not only the out of band, which we aren't, but they are, so to speak, that you can pull them in, but also it helps with pileups and stuff. When they're in a pileup, when you got everybody in the world trying to get in there, just give your call sign phonetically once and then listen. And if you're making it through the mess, you will hear, generally because it's a mess, if it's a pileup, you're going to hear, I heard N2S come back. And you can even see Dan getting excited when he hears that because he thinks it's N2SRK that's being called. And you can come back at that point because polite people, if the man is saying, I'm hearing this much of a call sign and it doesn't match you, shut up so that whoever it does match can get through. You are not, if you keep talking, if you keep trying to break in, you're just being rude and you deserve to be tromped on. Listen, your timing is extremely important. You need to get in quick, but you also need to listen so that you're not so quick that he doesn't have a chance to get out of transmit mode before he's listening. So listen, you can hear a cadence of operation on a pileup. How quickly he answers, how quickly he picks up something. Actually, if you're a little slow sometimes, it can get the latter part of your call sign cleanly where everybody else is a total mess. So sometimes you can delay a little bit and have a chance to get in. Listen, you'll find the cadence. Go for it, Paul.
Yeah, and that always comes down to propagation as well. I mean, if there's a huge pileup and you're the first person to key up after he says QRZ, you might be heard, you might not be heard. It just depends on the conditions. And that's sometimes where an amplifier makes a huge difference. And like Tom said, if everybody is transmitting at the same time, maybe giving your call sign out a little later is a better way to go when things kind of calm down. So try different methods. Don't necessarily think that one particular method is always going to work. Even different times of the day for working Asia or Eastern Europe, you may have different techniques that work better. And contests, it just depends on. There's so many different factors. The best thing to do always, if you're trying to work a rare station in a contest, is to be one of the first stations that hears them start calling. But you can't always be that person. So other than just turn your amp on and you'll have a better shot at it. Okay.
Paul, one other thing.
Yes.
We really didn't mention propagation, but it's really important. Propagation is not symmetrical. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you can talk to somebody that they can hear you and you can hear them. But very often, unfortunately, propagation is not symmetrical. And you may hear a station, you may have enough power, you may be pointed in the right direction, but the way it refracts through the ionosphere, it ain't necessarily going to get back to them. It's not reciprocal. So there are times when a beautiful station will not be able to hear you.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking, when we're talking about propagation, you need to learn what propagation is and how it works. The way you do that is get on the air. And don't believe everything you hear, like, well, we're at the bottom of the sunspot cycle and all the bands are dead. You can believe that all you want. And then when there's a big DX contest, there's two really big ones every year, one in the fall, one in the spring, plus other contests as well. But there's two big ones, two major ones. And the bands may be dead, but they're not that weekend. So what that really means is that the bands are really not dead. There's just not very many people on the air. So get on different bands at different times. Learn how propagation works in the summer. Learn how propagation works in the winter. Learn how propagation works at the bottom of the sunspot cycle. Learn how it works at the top of the sunspot cycle. There's always a band open somewhere. Even when propagation is not good for DX, you can still work other states and or DX entities that maybe are within the range of the skip that day, right? So Alaska is a DX entity. Hawaii's a DX entity. Maybe you try to work some of those DX stations as opposed to working Eastern Europe or whatever. But there's always something open somewhere. Okay, DX clusters. We are going to do an entire presentation on DX clusters. And actually, if somebody would like to put that together, we would love to grab you and that presentation and get it on the air, because we really want to cover DX clusters, but you should use them often. You should use them anytime you get on the air. You should have your DX cluster going, and it helps you out tremendously to find out what band is open to different parts of the U.S. and different parts of the world. And I guarantee you, a DX cluster online will become your best friend. Absolutely, bottom line, especially during contests. And right on the Ham Radio Deluxe that I use, right on the screen is a DX cluster rolling through all the spots that people put on there. And you need to learn how to use these tools, because it will help you out a great deal when you're chasing DX. Also, a lot of bands do have beacons associated with them. You'll find them more on the higher frequency bands, but they're on all the bands, and learn to listen for beacons, because if you can hear the beacon on 160 meters from Virginia, then you can probably work Virginia. Maybe not, but it gives you a better idea of where the band's open. Also, if you have never worked if you've never been on Worked All States nets, I highly recommend you try that activity. There is a process, there is a learning curve that you have to understand how they operate. And some people think they're kind of corny, but I'll tell you something. It teaches you how to listen. It teaches you how to listen for call signs down in the noise. And there are people that can hear a call sign right at or maybe below the noise floor, seems like it anyway. And they pull out a call sign. And it's not because they have better hearing. It's because they have trained themselves to listen to those stations really close to the noise floor. And you get that experience by working these Worked All States nets and also other nets as well. And then try to work 100 countries. Make that a goal. You don't have to get the certificate. You don't have to send it off. You don't have to send your cards, your QSL cards off to the ARRL. You don't even have to log it, but make that a goal to try to work 100 countries. And again, as Tom mentioned earlier, it's 100 DX entities. There's 300 and something of them around the world. And but work towards working the first 100 DX entities, and that gives you a good goal to work towards. And as we get further up in the sunspot cycle, there are so many unbelievable countries out there that you can work that you probably will never be able to work during this time in the cycle. But as you get into the better part of the cycle, stations will pop up that are once in a lifetime opportunities. So set that as a goal of yours to work 100 countries, whether you log it or not. I think that's a worthwhile endeavor. And then also listen. If you've never worked a contest, get on the contest during the contest hours. Listen to how everybody is operating. Pull the contest information up on the internet. See what type of exchanges they're making that may sound foreign to you initially, but if you read what the exchange is, the exchange of information is different with every contest. You learn what that is, kind of figure out as Tom mentioned, the cadence of it all, and then try your hand at some different contests. We have some Parker Radio Association members that have jumped on different contests, and they've come in top 10 nationwide. They've come in first place on various contests. So it can be done, and there's certainly almost a contest. I would say there's a contest every single weekend, and maybe multiple contests when you get into the winter months. So whether it's a QSO party or the big CQ Worldwide, whatever the case is, get the list of contests off the ARRL webpage or look it up in your QST. You should all be ARRL members. I will just throw that out there. If I didn't say it, Dan will tell you, but there's a lot of benefits to being an ARRL member. But one of the things is they have a very good list of all the contests that are available every weekend. And let's see, the 13 colonies. Justin came by the house the other day and he had his mail and pulled out the certificate. He worked all 13 colonies this year, and what an absolute fantastic feat. I know other people like Mike have done that, and other club members as well. So contests go on all year, and get on there. The more you work the contest, the better you will be, and you'll understand more about propagation.
Paul, before you switch, let me add a slide in. Well, I guess you already switched. Never mind. Let me add some comments on that. First off, Elizabeth has been putting out in the blast list of contests and other call parties, and she's doing a really good job of that. And I think we ought to. She's not on, but there's a little applause for her. Really enjoyed that she's doing that one. For example, I picked up the Feldhell Schreiber party that they've been running every month until September. So that's keep a look at the Parker Radio Blast, and you can have some good stuff there. And heavens, yes, you better belong to the ARRL. Aside from the things they do for us, it is also a fantastic place to find information and help. And you have the archives. So, see, I can speak up for you, Dan. That is very important. Now, let's go to antennas, and I'm going to make one small qualification on everything that he's saying here, sort of, and that is make that a quarter wave vertical. Also, it could be loaded. And in fact, 80-meter quarter waves are definitely loaded with the big coil. But there are other vertical antennas. For example, there's some that are very popular that are basically in-fed half waves, and they do not require a huge radio field. But most of them, the AB680s and the Cushcraft, whatever it is, R9s, those things really, truly are trapped quarter wave radials, and you better believe it. They should be ground mounted, and they should have a good radio field. Justin's pointing out the stepper big IR, but Justin is rich, and we'll just ignore him entirely because they are extremely. Oh, is it the other fellow that has it? They are actually very expensive. They're very fine, but you have to be. We'll never mind. Just figure that you got to be somebody that doesn't care about the cost. They are fantastic. They tend to have a very low takeoff angle to them, which means they're pretty darn good for DX. That's why he's pointing out that they're really good. Yeah, you can get 80 on them. 80 tends to be so compromised, so narrow that if all you're interested in is doing FT8 or some of the digital stuff, you're great. And if you have particular nets you like to get on 80, yeah, you can tune it for that. He's saying low cost. They ain't nearly as cheap as a dipole. They can run into some bucks by the time you start adding stuff to them. Some of them require tuners. A lot of them do not. That's a little bit of misnomer because even like on 20 meters on a lot of the verticals, you get a high enough SWR on them that you really want to have at least some sort of tuner to maximize them. The business about more man-made noise than horizontal antennas, to be honest with you, I think that has changed in recent years. And I believe that's because of our noise sources have changed. I think we're finding a lot fewer. We have just as many vertically polarized noise sources, man-made problem, but I think we're also picking up a heck of a lot more horizontally polarized, and among other things, house wiring from things like LEDs and other nasty things that are putting out lots of noise. So I don't think that that's as universally true as it was once understood to be. Got any comments, Paul?
Well, I would say that probably half of our club members that operate HF operate some type of vertical antenna, whether it be a Hustler BT4, BT5, or BTV4, BTV5, or BTV6, or maybe it's a 4 BTV. But in any case, verticals are great antennas for all around use. I like them in a lot of cases because you do not need a tuner, and they're capable of handling up to full legal limit without an antenna tuner. So that just gives you one thing in the whole equation you don't have to worry about. So if you're thinking about putting up an antenna, it's your first antenna, or maybe you just need you want to put up a different type of antenna, you've never had a vertical, certainly give some serious thought to a vertical. If you go to almost every military installation around the world, the majority of the antennas that they use are vertical for many different frequencies, bands. So there is a reason for that. Okay, let's go on to wired dipole antennas. These are probably the most in terms of cost and in terms of what you get with this antenna once you get it in the air. I mean, this is a great antenna, and if you only have room for one antenna, or you can only put one antenna up, go with the single band wire dipole antenna. It can be off center fed or center fed, but the nice thing about these types of antennas is that you can buy a balun or you can build a balun, get some wire, and you can build the antenna yourself. Very easy to put together. You do need some space, especially for the lower frequencies that we talked about earlier. But if you have room to put up an antenna, you're going to find that the dipole is a very, very good fit for a lot of reasons. It's not very good for multiband operation, although there are some ways you can use a single band dipole and with multiple multipliers get some use on different bands. But for the most part, they're designed for a single band. They operate very, very good on that band, and in most cases, you don't need a tuner. So at least for a wide portion of each amateur radio band, if you build a wire dipole, you probably don't need a tuner for the majority of the voice portion of the band, and certainly you probably don't need a tuner at all for the CW portion. If you do cut the antenna each side, you cut it to the right length, then you'll be good to go. And with no tuner in line, the antenna becomes very efficient and works extremely well. If I only had one antenna, if I could only have one antenna, it would absolutely be a traditional center-fed dipole for whatever band I wanted to operate. If I operated more in the evenings, I would put up a 40-meter dipole. If I was at home all day or retired or whatever the case is, and I only operated during the day, I'd put up a 20-meter dipole. You will find that there is no better antenna for most amateur communications than a single band dipole. So keep those things in mind when you're looking for an antenna. And yes, dipoles will operate or work inside of an attic if you have the space. Are there reasons why they're not going to be as efficient there? Yes, but they will work. And if you only have room for one antenna, then this is a good fit. Okay, I'll cover this one too, Tom, while I'm here. These are some mistakes that I think new HF operators, you get your license and you want to get out, you want to get on the air, and you go down to HRO or you pick up an antenna online or whatever the case is. But these are some mistakes that I think a lot of operators make, and you'll be much better off if you don't make these mistakes. The first one is a G5 RV. If you go to HRO, they'll sell you a G5 RV. They're horrible antennas, in my opinion. Not because they're horrible antennas in general. It's because people typically don't follow the instructions and install them the way they're supposed to be installed, which is in free space and at the correct height. So people install them along the side of their house, or they install them incorrectly, and they don't work very well, and then they wonder why. So I would stay away from G5 RVs or the junior version unless you can actually install it according to the instructions at the correct height and in free space. Then the antenna will work reasonably well. Multi-band miracle antennas. There's no such thing. There are lots of antennas out there that say, cover every amateur band with no tuner. That's just not out. That's not the case. There is no such antenna like that. So if you fall for that marketing and you buy a a miracle antenna that will cover every amateur band with no tuner, good luck, but it's not going to work well. It's not going to be efficient. You're not going to get your signal out into the RF world where it works well. So there is no such thing as a miracle antenna. If you have to get an antenna, again, buy a single band dipole or build it, and you'll be in much better shape. Multi-band antennas in general do not work very well. There are some exceptions, and there'll be people that will swear that the fan dipoles work and this and that and the other, but there's always compromises. Always compromises. A end-fed wire antenna is probably as good a multi-band antenna as you're going to find, but you have to use a tuner. A lot of your power is going to be left right in the box, right in the tuner. And in my case, I use an end-fed antenna, wire antenna on 160 meters. I would imagine I'm probably getting about 5 watts truly to the antenna. So there are major compromises if you buy multi-band antennas in general. It's not the case in every situation, but for new operators trying to get on the air, try to stay away from the miracle multi-band antennas. Also, if you buy an antenna that says it's a vertical antenna, and that's what this line actually meant. Vertical antennas that are advertised as no ground radials required, they don't work. So it's a lot more difficult to install radials with a ground-mounted vertical, but the antenna will work if you put down radials. If you try to buy an antenna that advertises you don't need ground radials and it's a vertical, it's not going to work very well. Now, it may satisfy the need that you have to meet the wife's requirements or the spouse's requirements or the HOA requirements, but for the most part, if you're doing a ground-mounted vertical antenna or even an elevated vertical antenna, you need ground radials for the antenna to work. And then if you only have 12 feet to put up a wire antenna, we'll put it up. Some wire is always better than no wire in the air, but for the most part, figure out a way to get as much wire as you can in the air. Always more wire the better, especially on end-fed antennas and antennas that are designed to be used as a single wire. Get the wire. It doesn't matter whether it's straight. It doesn't matter whether it comes down, takes a jog, flows along the fence, comes up at an angle, and then goes up to the peak of the house. It doesn't matter. Get as much wire in the air as you can, and you'll always be happier with results. Tom, what comments do you have with regard to antenna mistakes for the new HF operator?
About 3 of them. One, I guarantee that if you put 20 hams in a room and ask them what's the best antenna, you will get 26 answers and a fist fight. There is everybody's got their own favorites, and you're going to find. By the way, I agree with you on the G5RV, but you're going to find some people that think the G5RV is the greatest antenna that has ever been created, and it will never be replaced. Not too long ago, you found advocates for quad beams was really popular. 43-foot verticals that had a tuning. They were tuned at the bottom. Real popular. There seems to be some fads in antennas. I'm going to say that the best thing you can do, as you said, go get yourself a dipole. There are some trapped two-band dipoles, which are pretty decent, that you can get out there, as long as they are not compromised as far as length. In other words, if they're not doing loading on the ends, you can actually get some fairly decent 20 and 40 dipoles out there that work well. The other thing is because of the ease and frankly low price of fiddling around with antennas, and the fact that you don't have to learn how to solder surface mount components, there is a lot of amateur interest in experimenting with various kinds of antennas. One of the things about hams is they're always putting up a new antenna. And for some folks, the latest antenna they put up is the best one that's ever been done. Or maybe the other way, and that's why they have to put up yet another antenna. Because of this, be very cautious about getting online advice, because there's a lot of folklore out there. I would still strongly urge, if you want to play around experimenting with antennas, go get the ARRL antenna handbook or antenna book. The best publications you can get out there. And you might also think about learning how to use the antenna simulation program that there's some free versions there to see how it's going to operate. And then finally, I don't care what you put up. There seems to be the hand of God in every kind of antenna that's ever been there. And there's a touch of chaos and a bit of hubris in every ham's antenna out there. Play with it, enjoy it, if you can get it loading. And above all, don't worry so much about the antenna. Get on the air and enjoy the propagation. That's all
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, any antenna is better than no antenna. And this slide just really was meant to tell people, don't be fooled by the advertising that that the miracle antennas, multi-band, no tuner, whatever they try to sell you is going to work, because in a lot of cases it just doesn't, and you won't know why you're not making contacts until you remember the presentation where Paul said, or Tom said, there's no such thing as a miracle, no tune, no this, no that antenna. So, okay, excellent. Thank you.
Question
Tom.
from YouTube Live about counterpoises for end-fed wire antennas, and maybe also cover common mode chokes if you're there, you're not having a counterpoise.
You want me to address it, Paul, or do you want to?
No, absolutely. Go ahead.
Definitely throw a choke on your in-fed, because it's very rare that an in-fed half wave. Well, let me back up. There's two kinds of in-feds. There's a random length, and then there is a in-fed half wave that is somewhat resonant, and two different cases there. If you're talking about an in-fed random, for heaven's sakes, put a choke on it someplace, because otherwise the shield on your coax is going to become part of the antenna system. It's going to radiate on you, and you're going to find out what RFI really means. That also, I think, has always benefited from a counterpoise of some sort or another. Now, I know there's some people that say counterpoise is not the right, is an invention of something, but I will tell you that the word itself was part of a patent in 1912 by somebody working on the Marconi patent for an antenna. There's a quarter wave. Anyhow, yes, counterpoise, very definitely. If you're talking about an in-fed half wave, the problem that you run there, yes, have a choke because of the same sort of thing. If you can put a good ground at the bottom of it, you do not necessarily have to have a counterpoise. Sometimes it works in place of a good ground, but if you have a good ground, you're going to be in good shape there. The biggest problem is on an in-fed, because the impedance on the feed point is so variable, so dependent upon how it's installed and the height above ground and the capacitance around it and so on. It's very, very difficult to get a good match at that point, unlike a center fed, which is going to be, theoretically 72, but it's going to be closer than anything on an in-fed. So there you definitely need, I would always put a choke on it. A lot of the commercial in-fed half waves actually incorporate a choke. They have the 49-to-1 matching transformer, and then they have a choke. And I'm through.
Any other questions? So Wayne or Justin or anything else came in?
Not that I see.
Nope.
All right. Well,
Hey, can I ask a riddle?
yes, absolutely.
All right. So just because we were talking about end feds, it made me think of something. So a random wire end fed, it's 90 foot ish somewhere. I was feeding with a 4-to-1 un, and it worked pretty well, except on 20 meter. So I replaced the 4-to-1 with a 9-to-1, and it seemed to wake 20 up pretty well. Is that because it changed the load patterns for 20 by changing the feed point impedance, or why did it help? Is what I was wondering. I was just randomly changing parts because I don't know what I'm doing.
Change in impedance. You were feeding it at 20. You had a higher impedance feed point on your random, and so when you put in a 9-to-1, you had a better match, sir. I would bet.
Yeah, SWR came down a little bit, so I assume, like I said, I didn't measure anything. I never put a VNA on it or anything. I just swapped a part and flung some RF and hoped for the best. And by golly, that's what being a ham's all about. So,
Yes. That would be my guess, Ray, is that you had a better match with a 20 meter. And by the way, a random, one of the problems you can run into with, quote, random length end feds is that you can accidentally hit a length that happens to be resonant on one of the bands you're interested in which case it quit being a random and it becomes an end fed, and the balance you stuck on the end of that thing, or stuck on the end of that, it's no longer, it needs to be a 49-to-1, not a 9-to-1.
sure.
So there are charts online, you can Google it, that show you, what length of wire is good for a resident antenna, and what length of wire is good for a non-resident random antenna. And those charts are actually pretty darn accurate. I find that people tend to not measure wire real accurately sometimes. So they think they're putting up 94 feet, and it really is 96 feet. Well, all of a sudden that becomes a multiple of something that is perfectly resonant. So all of a sudden, as Tom mentioned, it doesn't match. So when you're actually cutting a piece of wire for an end fed or for a dipole, take your time to lay it out and measure it very, very accurately. And you'll find that the end result is more in line with what you want. We were building those dipoles at the club meeting for field day. And, just with everybody in the room and the tape measure that only went to 25 feet, and we're trying to get a longer length. And, it takes time to get it all right. And we cut two pieces that we were absolutely positive were the same length, and they were different by 2.5 inches. So that's important. Get your length right.
Can I ask another silly question related to wire length?
Go for it.
How important is velocity factor when you're playing with insulated wire? Because the insulation is going to change your velocity factor, right?
Not a heck of a lot, but yes.
Okay. Is it something to get bent about?
Well, the biggest lie that anybody ever came up with is that there's such a thing as an isotropic radiator. And then the second biggest lie that they came up with is that you have a dipole in free space, because there ain't no such thing as free space. It's not the difference between insulated and bare wire. I believe the velocity factor for bare wire is 0.97, and I think for insulated can, depending upon the insulation, can get down to like 0.95. something like that, which is a very small thing. However, you're going to have so many capacity effects near where you're attaching the wire because it's not going to be in free space, that's going to artificially lengthen your wire anyhow. So, there's Ray, what I would say is measure it carefully and figure you're going to have to trim it.
Fair enough.
Always.
Yeah.
Is that all? Am I fair in saying that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the test is in when it's hanging between the two trees, right? And or whatever, and it either works or very rarely have I ever built a traditional dipole, even with measuring everything exactly right. That once I got it up, it was exactly on that frequency that I thought it was going to be on. So. You just have to make adjustments after you get it in the air. And that may mean you have to take it up and down 3 or 4 times, but plan on that. And if you get it right the first time, then great. But it takes time to get them where you want them.
Hey, Ray, if you really want to go crazy, I just looked it up. The velocity factor of Teflon insulated wire ranges from, not Teflon, but PVC, polyethylene, or Teflon ranges from 0.95 to 0.98. However, it also becomes important as to the diameter of the wire. Fatter wire has a lower velocity or has a higher velocity factor. So you can drive yourself nuts.
Yeah, I guess the fatter wire has more because there's more surface area for skin effect, right?
Right.
Okay.
And if you really want to go nuts, take a look at the 80-meter antenna at W1AW that the lab guys built. It's actually 4 wires that are separated by plastic cross pieces, about a yard between them, because that makes it electrically fatter than a single wire, and that increases the bandwidth.
Oh, okay.
I don't think your HOA would go for that.
So somebody asked, what is the lowest cost that you can install a vertical antenna? Well, if you go with the 4 BTV, the antenna itself is right around $200. And then you need to add another couple $100 for probably a fold over base plate and radial wires and maybe a bulkhead connectors. So you're probably under $400 for a really clean, nice vertical antenna installation. Now, if you're using some of the higher end vertical antennas that are out there, you can easily have $1,000 in some of the other brands. But if you're wanting to do something on the cheap, the 4 BTV, which is a 4-band vertical. It's a trap vertical. And that's assuming that you buy the wire at Home Depot or whatever and put it down with a fold over base plate, probably a little under $400.
However, if your conspicuous consumption N0AD, you can spend a few $1,000s. Look at the smile.
Well, antennas are always something transceivers. You can spend $600, or you can buy a Flex 6600 and spend $7,500. And you can buy a 7851 and spend $14,000. So I think with transceivers, is a $12,000 radio better than a $900 radio? Probably, but is a $1,000 vertical better than a $400 vertical? I don't know. It's hard to, everybody has a different opinion on that. But again, the cheapest antenna you can probably put up is make your own dipole.
Those work beautifully. By the way, the reason that Lane's is so expensive is it has a beryllium shaft thing that runs through the middle of it that you actually adjust the beryllium copper, that adjusts the actual length of the antenna to be a quarter wave at the frequency he's operating at. So they're guaranteed there's no tuning, but it is a complex and beautifully made piece of equipment.
Now you're talking about AD0WB, not N0AD.
Who has the big step?
That is AD.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's not me.
Wayne was like, he had a
I
blank
wish.
Well, I didn't know who had what, and all I could see, Justin, is you pointing, and you were pointing at Wayne.
Well,
so
I think with the Brady Bunch thing, it's different for everybody. So
Mr. Unbalanced. Okay, Mr. Unbalanced is the conspicuous consumption.
Yeah. Now that we're talking about him, and he is retired, by the way. So, but he did lay a lot of radials, and it is always resonant, even on 80 meter.
Although I think he's got a loading coil for 80. I think that antenna has a coil on the bottom of it, but it's still beautiful. I'm sorry, Wayne. I was accusing you of all sorts of horrible things.
He said,
"Hey, it's not the first time." But he's not showing up on the YouTube channel, so because he has to talk to pop up.
So just a quick comment on vertical antennas. Take your time to put down as many radials as you can afford. A really good installation, if you want to see one, would be Randy's or Stan's. I can add some call signs to that, but basically, if you want to see a good vertical installation, and Mike's as well, take your time, put down lots and lots of verticals in a 360-degree pattern, and it doesn't matter how long they are necessarily. Just get as many radials down as you can. Justin, what is your comment on that?
I have my Butternut HF9V on the air now with about a dozen, and I'm planning on adding about 6,700 more, but I'm going to start with 67. Got all the wire, got all the connectors. If anyone really wants to get to know radial installation, let me know. We can have a radial party.
Absolutely. It takes a lot of time to put those down right and get them straight and get the staples in the ground to keep them in the ground. And if we lived in Oklahoma back in the day, you just put them down on the ground, and after half of a summer season, the grass grows up and covers up the radials, and you just mow right over them. No big deal. Here, because things grow a little slower, it may take a little longer, but and also the question was asked, what type of wire? I don't really think it matters. It can be bare wire, insulated wire. It can be 12 gauge, 14 gauge, 22 gauge. Just get as much wire down as you can. Don't cross the radials. Keep them nice and straight. Different lengths is fine. And 360-degree pattern. But if you can't do that, and you can only do a 180-degree pattern, we'll just do a 180-degree pattern. Just get the wire on the ground with the vertical antenna. You'll be much happier with performance.
Another option, if it's not going to be bad for pets, I got this idea from someone with the 43-foot vertical, is chicken wire. I used galvanized chicken wire at my last QTH. Could not get it up when I moved, by the way, so congrats to the new homeowner. But it was fantastic. Now I had the antenna in the corner of a yard and ran out 25 feet of chicken wire in two directions. So I only had kind of half of what I needed. And that thing was very, very good on all the bands it was supposed to be good on. So chicken wire is also another way to get a vertical going. A little different.
Yeah, I have actually pig wire, which is thicker, 4 foot wide, and it's 50 feet. 3 directions, so it's an X with a line down the middle and the verticals in the middle, and I bind all of it together in the center. So yeah, that's basically what I'm using for my butternut.
Well, I guess I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. We've had a fantastic meeting, and I can't wait till we can get back to our our face-to-face meetings. But until then, this has worked out good. Thank you, Tom, for assisting in the presentation.
Thank you.
And all your commentary. And we have the Parker Radio Association has tremendous number of resources available to you if you want to, if anyone wants to install an antenna. We have a lot of experience with different types of antennas, and we're happy to put together a small team using social distancing and help you out. So if you drop us a email at parkerradio.org, we will put together the right people based on what type of antenna you want to install, and we'll come out and help you with the design, and then we'll even help you with the installation if you need it. So don't hesitate to ask. We are doing the best we can to respond to all of the requests within a reasonable period of time. And we have a couple installations actually scheduled over the next 30 days. So, but let us know. We'll be happy to help. Maybe it's something we can just talk about on the air during one of our nets, or maybe it's something we need to come over to your QTH and take a look at. But either way, we're happy to help out. And we've helped a lot of club members with antennas, and a lot of club members have helped other club members. And we've helped people that are not part of our club. So, you know, we kind of go where we need to go. So thank you all for being here tonight for our August Elmer Night, or Elmer Night, depending upon how you say it. And Dan, do you have any comments you'd like to throw out? Did you like my plug on everybody needs to be an ARRL member?
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing better than after you get your ticket and joining the PRA that you should join the ARRL. So, Paul, my thanks to you for mentioning the ARRL. Great organization, you know, and I'm not just saying that just by representing them. The member benefits go well beyond just QST Magazine once a month. As Paul had mentioned, there is just a plethora of benefits that are available to the members, and you know, those resources, you know, obviously aren't you know, don't come free. You know, those resources do come obviously at a cost. So your membership annually to the ARRL not only takes care of QST, obviously, but it takes care of a host of other services. And one of the ones that is near and dear to my heart is protecting the spectrum of which amateur radio has been allocated. Money talks in Washington, as we all know, and certainly the precious allocations that we have within the band plans are becoming very well noticed by commercial entities. So spectrum protection is very, very big, and one of the things that's at the forefront within the ARRL. So if you have any questions on membership or what the ARRL is all about, feel free to reach out to me. My call sign at parkerradio.org, or my call sign at ARRL.org. So happy to help out with any of that. And Paul, Tom, I want to thank you guys for just a great job. Well done. Pardon me for being fashionably late tonight. Had a board meeting actually with my constituents, directors and vice directors tonight. So some good exciting news coming out of Newington as of tomorrow morning. So keep an eye out on the ARRL website for that. So that's what I have from this end. But again, Paul, Tom, just a fantastic job, guys. And the timing of this couldn't have been more perfect, simply from the fact that here we are, September, October, November. We're going to start getting into some really, really good contest season time. And no better way to gear up from that than when the weather's still warm, the snow's not flying. Get yourself ready. There's a lot of DX to work on the bands as well. And actually one card that, you know, Paul was talking about 10 meters. When 10 meters comes alive, I'll show this. So this was actually my first contact into Ireland. A guy by the name of Jerry McLaughlin, who I worked back in October of 2011. And I don't know if you can see the frequency or not, but there it is. 28.473 on sideband voice. And that was with 50 watts and an absolute paperclip of an antenna. So 10 meters, keep an eye out on it. Once the solar cycle comes back around, it's going to come alive. Get on the bands. That's what they're there for. Call CQ. You'll never know who you may work. You may work Ireland. You may work other European countries. I worked Slovenia the other afternoon on 20 meters, just in the middle of the afternoon. So get on the air. That's what it's there for.
Yeah, thanks, Dan, and thanks for everybody for participating tonight. And Tom, you had any final thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to add something to Dan's. One of the things you keep saying QST, but your membership now gets you access to QST, to the digital versions of QST, QEX if you want to get down and dirty and technical. The national, that's the DXer contest journal, National Contest Journal, and On the Air. You get all 4 magazines now. Admittedly, you're only going to get one paper copy of them, but you get all 4 magazines on the net. There's out there, and there's some really good stuff to read. So they've opened that up. That's something else to consider with your membership. And that really is all that I have. Thank you, Paul, for giving me the opportunity to participate in this. I really appreciated that. Thank you.
All right. Well, 73 to everybody. And I'll throw it over to Justin or Wayne to shut this puppy dog down.
Yeah, I just had one other thing to add there. I am doing an event on Sundays. If you guys want to reach out to me, I'm just going to a park, throwing an antenna in the air, and getting on the radio. If anybody's interested, feel free to shoot me an email at nzradio@parkerradio.org. And yeah, more than happy to show some new people, playing HF and getting some QSOs. Last time I did it on Sunday, my first contact was to Cancun, Mexico, so with 5 watts. So really nice. So I throw that out there. But yeah, thanks everybody for showing up. And 73.
Yeah, 73.
74. Good night.